From delivering pizzas in Long Island to dazzling millions on America's Got Talent, Sal Valentinetti's story seemed destined for triumph. But behind the golden buzzer and roaring applause lies a reality few ever imagined. What heartbreaking truths turned his dream into a struggle far greater than the spotlight could show? Stay with us because his journey reveals more than anyone expected. The voice that almost went unheard. Every great story begins with a moment no one expects. And for Sal Valentinetti, that moment came not under the spotlight of a grand stage, but in the corner of a high school music room. Long before television audiences knew his name, Sal was simply another student experimenting with brass instruments. He had spent his early musical years behind the baritone horn, bass, trumpet, and trombone, never once imagining that his true instrument was his own voice. It took one small twist of fate to change everything. The turning point came when his teacher asked about a tune that S.'s grandmother often sang. Unable to recall the title, S did something instinctive. He opened his mouth and sang. The song was Mac the Knife, a Bobby Darin classic. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. The room that once carried the heavy sounds of brass instruments filled with a voice full of richness and maturity, far beyond his years. His teacher froze, astonished at the deep timbre that came from a boy barely old enough to drive. The teacher's advice was immediate and direct. S needed vocal training. At first, the suggestion seemed out of place. After all, S had never seen himself as a singer. Yet, something about that moment clicked. His grandmother's influence had been quietly shaping his taste for years, surrounding him with the golden age of crooners like Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. Now, for the first time, that influence came alive in him. Growing up in a close-knit Italian-American family in Bethpage, Long Island, Sal's world was full of tradition, warmth, and family gatherings where music was as essential as food. His grandmother, in particular, had been the keeper of culture, constantly playing records that carried the smooth sophistication of the Rat Pack era. This was not background music. It was a soundtrack of heritage echoing through every holiday, every Sunday dinner, and every memory of youth. As a teenager, S found himself caught between the expectations of everyday life and the pull of something extraordinary. Singing had never been part of the plan. His peers were looking toward predictable futures, college applications, part-time jobs, steady careers. S, meanwhile, carried an untapped gift that seemed almost out of step with the world around him. While others were listening to pop hits, he was immersing himself in songs released decades before he was born. What made his discovery unique was not just the sound of his voice, but the style it belonged to. Few young men of his generation embraced the velvet tones of Sinatra or the cool swagger of Dean Martin. Sal's voice was an echo from another time, one that immediately stood apart. When he began small performances at family events and local gatherings, people listened with astonishment. Here was a teenager bringing back an era of music many thought had faded. The encouragement he received only pushed him further. Each performance built his confidence, transforming the boy who once hid behind instruments into a young man unafraid to step into the spotlight. By the time he was performing Sinatra tributes at local venues, Sal understood that he was carrying more than just a voice. He was carrying the weight of tradition and the spirit of a bygone era. The moment of discovery in that classroom did more than reveal a hidden talent. It ignited a fire that would carry him toward paths he had never imagined. A teacher's instinct, a grandmother's influence, and a teenager's willingness to risk embarrassment all combined to shape the birth of The Voice. Yet behind this sudden rise of a singer lay the humble daily life of an ordinary young man trying to balance dreams with reality. Before fame, Sal's story unfolded in the most unexpected of places. But how could a boy delivering pizzas transform himself into one of America's most beloved crooners? Stay with us to uncover the details. From pizza boxes to big dreams in the heart of Bethpage, Long Island, Sal Valentinetti wasn't first known for his velvet voice. He was known for something far more ordinary, showing up at front doors with steaming boxes of pizza. Long before millions watched him sing Sinatra, he spent his days weaving through traffic, juggling delivery orders, and greeting families with a smile that hinted at charisma still waiting to be discovered. The life of a pizza delivery driver was anything but glamorous. There were nights of unpredictable weather, days spent rushing between customers, and long hours that rarely left time for rest. Yet, amidst the chaos of ringing phones and crowded kitchens, carried a secret rhythm within him. With each delivery route, the sounds of Sinatra and Bobby Darin played in his mind. Locals started noticing something unusual. It wasn't the pizza that made them smile most, but the man who delivered it. Wasn't just another delivery worker. He lingered long enough to exchange jokes, tell a quick story, and brighten a customer's evening. The community came to know him as Sal, the Voice, a nickname born not from television, but from the cafes and street corners where he would occasionally break into song. In neighborhoods across Long Island, his name became synonymous with warmth and charm, a young man determined to keep alive the old-school style of entertainment his grandmother had taught him to love. Even when surrounded by the grind of everyday work, never let go of his dream. The delivery car doubled as a stage where he rehearsed classics in solitude. Every traffic light became a rehearsal break, every quiet street an opportunity to refine his phrasing. Behind the wheel, he wasn't a delivery driver, he was a crooner, preparing for an audience that didn't yet exist. What made his story striking was not just the contrast between pizza boxes and microphones, but the discipline he built in those years. Working late nights meant sacrificing sleep for rehearsals. Balancing unpredictable shifts with practice sessions required persistence. The very job that seemed to trap him in routine was also shaping the resilience he would later need in competition. Bethpage residents began spreading his reputation. He wasn't only a delivery boy, he was an entertainer in waiting. At local cafes, he would sip cappuccinos, talk with friends, and map out how to break into a world that seemed impossibly far from Long Island's quiet streets. There was no agent, no formal plan, only belief, charisma, and the kind of old-fashioned determination that matched his music style. Many around him saw only the delivery job. Few realized he was training his voice night after night, fueled by the conviction that greatness could come from the most unexpected beginnings. His goal was not simply to sing, but to revive a style nearly forgotten in modern pop culture. That ambition, nurtured in the back rooms of pizzerias and the sidewalks of Bethpage, prepared him for a leap most would never dare to take. By the time he decided to pursue a singing career in earnest, had already lived two lives, one in the uniform of a delivery worker and another in the quiet rehearsals where he transformed into The Voice. It was a dual existence that revealed just how close ordinary routine and extraordinary ambition can coexist. But ordinary jobs don't always lead to extraordinary futures. What gave the courage to risk rejection and stand before celebrity judges singing songs of a bygone era in a world that craved modern hits? Stay with us as we reveal everything. A rejection that sparked fire. Opportunity often comes disguised as disappointment. And for Sal Valentinetti, that truth revealed itself on one of the most competitive stages in the world, American Idol. Before television audiences knew him as Sal, the voice, he walked into a room filled with cameras, nerves, and judges whose words could change a life in seconds. When Sal stepped into his audition, he chose a song that meant everything to him. Frank Sinatra's My Way. It wasn't just a performance choice, it was a declaration. Each note carried the weight of tradition, and each phrase reminded him of the music that shaped his upbringing. In a world where most contestants chased current chart toppers, S walked in dressed like an echo from another era, determined to stand out by staying true to himself. The judges' reactions were telling. Lionel Richie was quick to highlight the maturity in his voice, praising the depth that seemed unusual for a man his age. Jennifer Lopez admired his talent, recognizing that he carried something authentic. Adam Lambert, too, saw his potential, calling him the kind of performer audiences at home would adore. For a brief moment, it looked as if the door to stardom was wide open. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Harry Kick Jr., himself an accomplished musician, was less convinced. He argued that while S was undeniably gifted, his style didn't quite fit the mold American Idol was searching for at the time. With a single no vote, the atmosphere shifted. The dream, for now, slipped away. The rejection was painful, but it carried lessons that shaped Sal's path forward. Standing on that stage, hearing doubts cast over his future, forced him to decide whether his music was a passing hobby or a lifelong pursuit. Many contestants would have walked away defeated, but Sal felt something different. An inner fire to prove that his voice had a place, even if one stage didn't see it. What made this moment so significant wasn't just the setback, but the way he chose to handle it. Instead of abandoning his dream, he treated the criticism as fuel. The no vote didn't silence him, it sharpened him. He returned home with greater determination, resolved to refine his voice, master his stage presence, and search for a platform where classic crewing could truly belong. His brief time on American Idol also revealed something critical about public connection. Even though he didn't progress far in the competition, the audience response suggested that there was a hunger for his style of music. People weren't simply entertained, they were transported in a landscape dominated by modern pop. S offered nostalgia, wrapped in authenticity, and that authenticity was beginning to carve out its own demand. The rejection became in many ways his first real test. Could he endure the sting of doubt without surrendering to it? Could he keep singing when others told him he didn't fit the mold? For S, the answer was clear. He would continue forward, not by changing who he was, but by embracing it even more. This phase of his life proved that the road to success is rarely straight. Sometimes the most painful moments are the very ones that prepare a performer for greatness. S didn't know it then, but his next leap would land him on a stage far larger in front of judges who would see in him what American Idol overlooked. But what happened when S stepped onto that new stage and delivered a performance powerful enough to stop the show? Stay with us to uncover what comes next. The golden buzzer that shook the room. The lights of America's Got Talent held a kind of magic that no small-town venue could replicate. For Sal Valentinetti, stepping onto that stage was like walking into a dream wrapped in blinding spotlights and roaring anticipation. Unlike his earlier experiences, here he wasn't just another hopeful singer. He was about to test whether his old-school voice could captivate millions in a single performance. Dressed sharply and carrying himself with unshakable charm, Sal had more than music to offer. His presence commanded attention before he even sang a note. The judges leaned in with curiosity, and the audience fell into that hushed anticipation that only happens when something remarkable is about to unfold. Then came the opening notes of Sinatra's My Way, and suddenly the theater was filled with a sound that didn't just echo through the hall. It transported everyone to another time. From the first phrase, the audience sensed they were witnessing something special. It wasn't just a voice hitting notes. It was a voice carrying history. Each line delivered by S seemed to stitch together the glamour of the past with the immediacy of the present. By the time he reached the song's soaring climax, the judges were on their feet, applauding not only his performance, but his daring choice to revive a style rarely seen on a talent show stage. The moment that followed became one of the most defining in AGT history. Heidi Klum moved beyond words, slammed the golden buzzer, sending glittering confetti cascading from the rafters. The crowd erupted in cheers as, stunned and overwhelmed, stood in the middle of the stage, realizing that his life had just shifted in a single instant. In that moment, the pizza delivery boy from Long Island was transformed into a national star. The golden buzzer did more than advance him to the next round. It validated everything he had worked for. It told him that his decision to stay true to his style had been the right one. Heidi Klum herself expressed admiration for his ability to bring back timeless music with fresh authenticity. Simon Cowell, often critical and hard to impress, acknowledged his talent with encouragement that carried weight. For Sal, this wasn't just approval. It was a turning point that erased the doubts planted in earlier rejections. What made the moment unforgettable was the reaction outside the studio. The audition clip spread rapidly across social media, reaching millions in a matter of days. Viewers across the globe were introduced to Sal the Voice, a man who reminded them of a time when singers didn't need gimmicks or trends to win hearts. Online comments poured in, calling him a throwback in the best way possible and hailing him as a new Sinatra for a modern age. The performance became more than entertainment. It became a cultural moment. In an era where pop and hip-hop dominated charts, S brought jazz swing and classic crooning back into conversations. Suddenly, younger audiences were exploring songs their grandparents once adored, drawn in by the raw authenticity of his delivery. S wasn't just performing, he was reviving an art form. For Sal himself, the golden buzzer was a promise of new beginnings. It opened doors to live shows, gave him a national platform, and allowed him to show that his talent could carry through beyond one dazzling audition. But it also carried the responsibility to prove that the confetti moment wasn't a fluke and that he truly belonged among the best. In hindsight, that night was more than a performance. It was a statement of intent. It announced to the world that Sal Valentinetti had arrived, not as a novelty act, but as an artist determined to honor the legacy of legends while carving out his own space. What happens when the spotlight grows hotter, the competition fiercer, and the stakes higher than ever? Let us tell you, singing through triumph and heartbreak. Every competition reaches a point where charm alone is not enough. And for Sal Valentinetti, the quarterfinals of America's Got Talent became that critical test. The glimmer of the golden buzzer had launched him into the spotlight. But now he had to prove he could hold his ground against some of the most talented acts in the world. This wasn't the warm reception of an audition anymore. This was the unforgiving stage where every vote mattered. When the lights rose on his quarterfinal performance, S knew the pressure was higher than ever. Yet rather than faltering, he leaned into the challenge. Taking on Sinatra's "That's Life," he brought not only vocal power, but a charisma that radiated across the room. His gestures, his phrasing, and his natural ease reminded the audience that he was more than a singer. He was a showman in the truest sense. The crowd responded with roaring approval, but the reality of the competition soon hit hard. Not everyone would move forward. S found himself precariously close to elimination, relying on votes that came down to the slimmest of margins. It was a reminder that talent alone could not always shield him from the brutal nature of live television. Reaching the semifinals was a victory in itself, but it demanded even more of him. This round wasn't about introduction, it was about survival. Returning to the stage, S carried a determination that burned brighter than before. The judges noticed Simon Cowell, usually stingy with praise, reminded the audience that S had what he called golden pipes, a phrase that cemented Sal's identity as not just a novelty crooner, but a serious contender. Heidi Klum, who had pressed the golden buzzer weeks earlier, applauded his ability to embody every lyric, saying that the song wasn't just sung, it was lived. Yet behind the stage, S carried a private weight heavier than most could imagine. His beloved grandmother, the woman who had first introduced him to the music of Sinatra and Dean Martin, had recently passed away. The semifinals became not just a performance, but a tribute. Every note he sang was laced with memory. Every lyric felt like a conversation with her spirit. For the audience, the emotion was palpable, even if they didn't fully know what he was carrying inside. For S, it was both pain and fuel, giving him a reason to pour more heart into his performance than ever before. The night of the finale was unlike any moment he had faced before. It wasn't only his birthday, marking a personal milestone, but it was also his chance to prove that he could command the biggest stage of his life. Instead of choosing a single song, he embraced the challenge with a medley of classics. Fly Me to the Moon, Luck Be a Lady, and New York, New York. Each selection represented not just a performance, but a piece of the tradition he had carried from his childhood to that very night. The audience swept into the rhythm of nostalgia and showmanship, rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Judges who had seen countless finales were stunned. Simon Cowell, rarely known for comparisons to legends, declared that Sal's performance surpassed what he had expected, even invoking Sinatra's name with respect. The praise was overwhelming, the applause deafening. For S, it was the culmination of every struggle, every pizza delivery, every doubt, and every moment of perseverance. Still, the finale brought not only celebration, but heartbreak. Despite delivering one of the season's most memorable performances, the title slipped through his fingers. The winner's name was called, and Sal's journey ended just short of the crown. Grace VanderWaal, with her youthful voice and original songs, captured the victory. S, however, left the stage not as a defeated contestant, but as a celebrated star whose impact reached far beyond a trophy. The finale showed the world the full measure of his ability, resilience, artistry, and emotional depth that touched millions. His journey on America's Got Talent ended, but his story had only just begun. What path awaited him once the cameras dimmed and the glitter of the stage gave way to reality? Come with us to know the fight to stay relevant. The end of a television competition often feels like the end of a story. But for Sal Valentinetti, it was only the beginning of a much harder chapter. Leaving the stage of America's Got Talent with national recognition did not guarantee lasting fame. The applause faded, the cameras turned to new contestants, and S found himself facing the toughest challenge yet, turning a season of stardom into a lifelong career. Rather than retreating into obscurity, S stepped forward with determination. He began recording, intent on capturing the crooner sound that had won him fans across the country. His first release, the EP titled The Voice, gave listeners a chance to hear his talent outside the competition format. It wasn't a single performance. It was a statement of identity, showing that his love for jazz and classic standards was more than an act. The project became a bridge between the young man from Long Island and the professional entertainer he was becoming. Momentum carried him further. In 2016, he released Christmas Presents, an album filled with festive classics sung with his signature style. It wasn't just a seasonal release. It was a carefully chosen step to show versatility. Listeners could hear joy, warmth, and charm woven into holiday standards, each one polished with the voice that had once stopped a live audience in its tracks. Fans embraced it, and critics noted that he was proving himself as more than a one-show wonder. 2 years later, Sal released Little Valentine, an album recorded in a studio made legendary by Frank Sinatra himself. For him, it was more than a career milestone. It was a symbolic connection to the very artist who had shaped his earliest dreams. Singing in the same space where Sinatra once stood was proof not only of how far he had come, but also of his commitment to keeping the crooner tradition alive in modern times. Recording was only one part of the battle. To remain visible, Sal needed the stage, and he found it across the country. He headlined at renowned venues such as Madison Square Garden and the NYCB Theater at Westbury. His shows often sold out, filled with audiences who longed for the nostalgic sound he carried. Each performance became more than music. It was storytelling, where Sal engaged directly with his crowd, blending humor, personality, and song into a full evening of entertainment. Collaboration also shaped his journey. Sharing stages with legendary comedians like Jay Leno in Las Vegas and Joe Piscopo gave S the chance to reach audiences beyond the music scene. These performances displayed his ability to entertain across genres, cementing his role as more than just a singer. He was becoming an all-around entertainer, a figure capable of reviving the variety show spirit of another era. Industry veterans also began to recognize his rare gift. Among them was Emmy-winning producer Billy Joel, who had worked with stars like Celine Dion and Pink. Joel praised S for his ability to capture a vintage sound in a modern world, calling his voice one of the few that could bridge generations. That acknowledgement reinforced what many fans already knew. S wasn't imitating the past. He was reinventing it for today. Yet, the journey was not without struggle. The music industry is notoriously difficult, especially for artists outside mainstream trends. While pop stars dominated charts, S had to carve out a space for classic crooning in an era that often overlooked it. His persistence, however, kept him relevant by offering fans exclusive clubs with early ticket access and personal engagement on social media. He built a loyal base that followed him from venue to venue, ensuring that his voice was never forgotten. Post-AGT life demanded reinvention, and S rose to the challenge. From intimate shows to international tours, from albums steeped in tradition to modern reinterpretations, he found ways to prove that his artistry was not confined to a single TV season. But even as his professional life soared, his personal story was entering a new chapter filled with love, health battles, and transformation. Love, loss, and transformation. Fame often shines brightest under the stage lights. but real life unfolds far from the cameras. For Sal Valentinetti, the years after America's Got Talent brought moments that no performance could rival. Moments of love, moments of challenge, and choices that reshaped the course of his personal journey. The most joyful milestone arrived when S asked his longtime sweetheart, Gianna, to marry him. Their engagement was not a quiet affair. It resonated across social media, where fans celebrated alongside them. Hundreds of messages poured in, not only congratulating the couple, but recalling the years when audiences had first fallen in love with Sal's voice. For supporters, it was as if his story had come full circle, from a hopeful singer with a dream to a man ready to begin a family of his own. The engagement revealed another side of him, not just the performer on stage, but the devoted partner who valued loyalty and love as deeply as he valued music. Yet joy was accompanied by a more sobering reality. During routine medical checks, S learned he was pre-diabetic. The news was a shock. While he had long embraced the classic image of the crooner lifestyle, fine food, drinks, and late nights, it was clear that his health could no longer be ignored. Instead of hiding the struggle, he confronted it openly. With Gianna's unwavering encouragement, he began a disciplined path of diet changes, exercise, and daily routines designed to rebuild his health. Over time, his transformation became visible. S lost nearly 50 lbs, a feat that fans quickly noticed during his concerts and appearances. But behind the visible change was a deeper story of resilience. The weight loss wasn't about vanity or pressure from fame. It was about survival, about reclaiming control over his body before illness could take it away. By embracing this healthier lifestyle, he showed that strength isn't only found in hitting powerful notes, but in facing private battles head-on. Even while adjusting to a new way of living, S remained devoted to the people who had always believed in him. He maintained a strong presence online, speaking directly to fans and inviting them into his world through personal updates. His private VIP club became more than a membership. It became a community where those who had once voted for him on AGT now celebrated his health victories and personal milestones. It was this connection that reminded S that fame is fleeting, but relationships with fans can last a lifetime. Through it all, he never forgot the woman who had inspired his very first songs, his grandmother. Her memory continued to guide him, not just in the music he chose, but in the way he approached life. Every performance, every recording, and even his commitment to health carried a piece of her influence. She'd introduced him to Sinatra, and now her legacy lived on through his voice, his discipline, and his dedication to carrying forward traditions into a new era. The man who once stood on stage as a contestant transformed into something more complex. A fiancé, a role model, and a living reminder that success is not measured solely by trophies or applause, but by how one navigates the unglamorous battles of life. Sal's journey from a hopeful singer to a man facing down personal trials speaks not only to resilience, but also to the humanity behind the performer. If Sal's rise and heartbreak taught us anything, which moment of his journey moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments.